on Friday. Gentlemen and lady, I don't know what is your take on this. I want us to spend a considerable amount of time on this. Dismas, I don't know what is your crystal ball on this, or what are your sources telling you?
Well, several things come to play. Number one, Mr. Polycarp Igathe is a horrible manager. That was a lapse in his judgment. Before he accepted to be Sonko's running mate, he should have done a self-examination to ask himself whether or not he's willing to work under Sonko, and also to try and understand who Sonko is before he took the offer. Now, having taken the offer as a running mate, and it's not very clear how his name came into the picture. It's not clear whether it's Sonko who went out fishing or he was presented to Sonko as a running mate. And I think that one is something maybe Jubilee insiders would be able to tell us. But be that as it may, when you are given a position like Mr. Igathe, 5 months is a very short space of time for you to call it quits. And I think Mr. Igathe owes Nairobians an apology, because a number of Nairobians voted for Mr. Sonko, not because of Mr. Sonko, but because of Igathe. Because we'd been told they had entered into a pact that while Sonko would be doing politics, he would manage the city. So he's lowered the expectations of so many residents in Nairobi, and he owes the entire nation an apology. So that being said, when you are the deputy to somebody like Governor Sonko, you need to go through the 48 rules of power. Number one, never ever outshine your boss. So at all times, Igathe was outshining his boss. When they go for meetings, he takes a decision without a reference to his boss. And really that's wrong. In my view, Igathe should have taken a moment to look for retired President Moi and ask him how he survived as a deputy president for 24 years. When there were turbulent waters. Or you should have created the opportunity to look for Deputy President Ruto to ask him how he has survived 5 years under President Kenyatta. But he did not do that. So instead what he did do, he decided to quit.
Right.
If you're the deputy governor, when you wake up early in the morning, you go to the governor's office and ask him, Mr. Governor, what are your expectations? What do you want me to do to support your leadership here in Nairobi? You don't start cutting deals without reference to the governor. I think you made a fundamental mistake, and he must apologize.
All right. You raised an important question, whether how they came together, whether Sonko fished for him or what happened. We understand from sources that there was a feeling inside the governor's camp that Igathe was imposed on them. I don't know what that means fundamentally, but there has been that issue. Mark, what is your take on this?
You know, I think I said on this show before the elections of August 8th, and I said to vote for Sonko expecting Igathe to act on behalf of Sonko is an act of foolishness. Because if you look at our laws and the practice indeed of deputy governorship in this country, your job is to ride in a motorcade and have a heartbeat. That's the only job that you have as a deputy governor. Your job is to breathe. You are a body double. In case the main actor dies mid-movie, you get to step in. And based on that reality, there was this imagination on the part of Igathe and his sponsors, whoever they may be, that somehow they'd be able to rein in Sonko and be able to create a duality within City Hall, which is the duality of a political Sonko and a technocratic Igathe. They just forgot one tiny detail, that all power in counties is vested in the person of the governor. And therefore, Igathe had very little space to play around and to declare everything. But this marriage was a dangerous one from the beginning. Can you imagine walking into an office and there is seated to your left Igathe and to your right Sonko, and you begin to start terms like GDP, return on investment, projecting the future? You'd end up having a two-way conversation between yourself and Igathe. And you can imagine Sonko sitting there wondering why he's not participating. And therefore, it was only a matter of time before Sonko would say, you know what, I'm going to have my own county back. But the question we have to answer is, what does Sonko economics look like? What does Sonko policy look like? What does Sonko practice look like?
Right.
Because Sonko is a very good opposition leader. He's been in opposition all through his political career. He opposes status quo all the time. The question is, what is he going to do when he's his own opposition? That's the question.
Well, Ben, Mark raises a fundamental issue, and it's unfair to assume that in fact Sonko does not have the intellectual capacity or infrastructure to run Nairobi, that he wouldn't understand the meaning of GDP, thinking about the future. You know, that's the economic jargon used in everyday life. And I suspect as a member of the National Assembly and Senate, and having gotten a bachelor's degree, he's got a basic understanding of these issues. So these issues will not be far-fetched from him. But moving forward, because you know now the horse has already bolted, moving forward, Governor Sonko needs to understand that he's supposed to be loyal to Nairobi voters. Whether they voted for him or not, he's supposed to be loyal to Nairobi voters, and he must have the humility to accept advice. In case he doesn't understand the meaning of GDP, then he needs to get an economist who can give him a crash program on what GDP is. If he doesn't have a concept on how to manage garbage, how to manage hawkers in the city, because in the evenings, if you walk to the CBD, you'll find hawkers jumping all over, doing their wares, and if Sonko is not careful, Nairobi is going to become like Lagos, where you'll find people hawking meat in the streets. So Sonko needs to know that he is governor. If he became governor via political capital from President Kenyatta or Deputy President Uhuru, he must now know that he's serving the people of Nairobi and rise to the occasion. He must look for a team of advisors, and I suspect his cabinet will be able to do that and make progress. If there are cartels that want to influence his decision-making process, if those cartels' thinking is not consistent with garbage collection in Nairobi, he needs to kick them off.
Two things. Just allow me 1 minute. First and foremost, look at the Hansard of Parliament and Senate and tell me how many times Sonko as Senator and MP spoke in Parliament. Two, I'm not doubting Sonko's intelligence. He's an extremely intelligent person, similar to Babayawi across the road in Kiambu County. The question is, what is his lingua franca? Where does he dwell most in? What does he take to as a fish in water? Sonko is a politician of the street. He's a gritty politician. Whether he can be a politician in the boardroom is a question he's never answered, not in Parliament. If you look at his record, even in running the CDF kitty, not in Senate, if you look at his record of speaking in Senate, and that, my friend, is a question he's not proven to us yet that he can answer.
Eddie, what do you think is happening here? Do you think that marriage was going to last? This seems to have caught many by surprise, but and reports indicate that there have been differences between the two concerning tenders and other things. I don't know, what is your take on this?
I think this case should not be looked only in a political sense. There is a political angle to it, and there's a technical angle to it. And it starts with the whole idea of Nairobi County.
Right.
We look at Nairobi as Nairobi leadership as only providing leadership to the people or the dwellers of Nairobi. But Nairobi, apart from the leadership giving the services that it needs to give to the people of Nairobi, Nairobi is a mega city in the African continent. And therefore, Nairobi needs to be placed, the leadership of Nairobi needs to be placed in understanding how Nairobi can serve that purpose. Number two, despite devolution, Nairobi still plays a critical role for other counties around the country. And that is why the idea of Polycarp Igathe came. The recognition that there are some fundamental challenges that Sonko, the governor, would have in governing Nairobi in a more broader sense. Now, when this marriage was crafted, the strategy that we need to look at technically were four forms of strategy. One is strategy as a plan. Strategy as a plan means if the two came together with a clear vision of how they wanted to run Nairobi, and it was a shared vision between the two, then we could not have seen these jitters. So this is indicative that there was no clear plan in the beginning. It was just a strategy as to employ. Strategy as employ means it was getting Igathe to kind of communicate to the wider interest to Nairobi that the challenges that Sonko was going to face were going to be handled by this corporate technical person who was coming into office to assist Sonko in some technical aspects. Then the strategy as a pattern, which is what I think that my friend Mark is focusing on more, and we're also seeing it with the presidency, whereby it's a combination of who is good in street politics and what, and get the numbers to get it to office without a clear dent of vision. Right. But you can also look at strategy as a perspective, which is what takes us to the political sense, which is if the coming of Igathe in office was indeed political, because we do know, if you look at the headlines on Standard, it is Sonko dares Uhuru. What does it mean? It means that Nairobi, given the perspective that I've given, is also facing the jitters we are seeing between the president and the deputy president. That is Ruto and Uhuru. Why?
Right.
Because we remember when Sonko came into the governorship of Nairobi, there was a serious clash between Sonko and the Jubilee leadership when they wanted to bring about Peter Kenneth. And this was like a compromise idea. So could we read some politics that perhaps that compromise that was made is now breaking up?
All right. Interesting perspective. Sandra, I would like you to respond to that. And also, people have had various varied reactions to Igathe's resignation. Many of them are saying it was a knee-jerk reaction. I mean, it was not thought out. There's a quote here from the Nairobi Senator, Johnson Sakaja, says, what happened is regrettable and should have been the last resort after different avenues, including consulting, were explored. What do you think?
I'm giggling first because I think as panelists, we are talking from both sides of our mouth, particularly regarding the education aspect. Because on one end, as we are discussing the Sonko issue, we are saying, oh, we want a particular person with this kind of qualifications. Because ideally, subconsciously, that's the way we've been conditioned to think, that for someone to take a leadership position, he or she must have certain standards, should have been exposed to a particular extent, and education plays a very good role. And that is why I think we are talking in more flowery terms when you're referring to Igathe. But for me, it raises three questions for me, or three issues rather. One is the leadership of Sonko himself, then Igathe's statements, and as my colleague said, the position of Nairobi as a county. One, I do agree what my colleague said in terms of perhaps he wasn't the chosen one as far as the leadership of Nairobi County is, because some of the sentiments that were being said then was that he wasn't exceptionally qualified, he didn't have the leadership skills, and that is why they brought Igathe on board. So that being said, regardless of whether it was a marriage of convenience, then there were certain things that needed to be done, certain foundations that needed to be placed in terms of how do they work, what are the parameters of Sonko and what are the parameters of Igathe as they are running the county. And perhaps that is what did not happen, so that we know what Sonko stands for, what Igathe stands for, and how they are working together to build Nairobi County. Right. So that being said, I do agree that his resignation could have been the last resort, because it's a conversation that we've had before. By the time you're applying for a job, you know exactly what that job entails, so that you know the advantages and disadvantages and the kind of people you're going to be working with, so that you say, I'm not able to work with this individual. This is not the environment that I'm well suited for. The third one is about Nairobi County and how it is placed, and I think that is why you are seeing all these claims about it being controversial and other interests coming in. Because on one end, as I've said before, the common understanding, it could be true, it could be untrue, is that we cannot trust Sonko with the running of Nairobi County. So we need to assist him towards meeting these objectives. So how are we assisting him? Are we assisting him in a manner that builds him as a person and builds the county at the same time, or are we doing things in a manner that taking away from him, making him even more insecure, and by that watering down some of the issues that Nairobi County should achieve?
Then she has put a very significant point, which is actually was in Igathe's statement on Facebook, as put it, that I've failed to earn the trust of my boss. And she brought the perspective
that sounds like a hollow academic statement.
Exactly. But what does that lead us to? It leads us into, can we analyze what will be the implications and the impact of Igathe's resignation? I think the politics aside, we go to the microeconomics and the macroeconomics bit of it, of what would the lack of because they consider that doesn't actually specify or stipulate clearly that in the absence of a deputy governor, what happens? Do you appoint a new governor, a new deputy, or do we go to another? There is no that provision. So we are talking about this a vacant office that does not have a constitutional framework of filling it up. Does that have a serious implication on the microeconomic and macroeconomic governance of Nairobi?
Nairobi County. We'll get to that.
Ben, the question is, Igathe is celebrated as a corporate leader. So one assumes that all the institutions he's been running before as an MD or a general manager, he had a board to work with. So one begins to wonder, how did he manage those boards? Probably composed of 12 persons. How did he manage those boards? And yet he cannot manage one human being by the name Sonko. Assuming Sonko has got irregularities or insecurities all the way from Nairobi to Timbuktu, if you're a good corporate leader, the moment you go to that boardroom with Sonko, you're supposed to manage his expectations. If it's about his academic achievements or lack of it, you're supposed to make him feel secure, that while I'm here, I'm not going to be outshining you. Why didn't Igathe do that? Was 5 months sufficient for him to say that I cannot work with Sonko? Or is he playing a trick on Kenyans? Those are the things we're supposed to be asking. And then the information on social media that he was unable to earn Sonko's trust. Did he actually ask Sonko for a private meeting? They can go to the beach in Mombasa, well-dressed, and have a conversation and ask him, what do you expect me to deliver? So that he plays by the rules. We've got so many governors during the last term who had really unpalatable relationship with their bosses. But they stuck there because they wanted to deliver. Because in my view, for Igathe to to resign this early, it's not really about him as a person. It's about the people in Nairobi who invested their vote in him. Because they came and said, Sonko is going to be doing politics 24 hours a day, and I'm going to manage the county.
Right.
So for me, I think it was a lapse of failure. And one hopes that he'll go back to Twitter like Donald Trump and actually apologize to residents of Nairobi because he has betrayed their trust.
Mark, as you respond to this, allow me to ask you, Sandra has accused you of speaking from both sides of your mouth. On one hand, you are...
You're making it personal.
No, it's with the lighter.
Just pointed out.
On one hand, you're saying that you don't like the academic qualification issues enshrined in the Kenya Constitution 2010. On the other hand, you setting standards for Sonko.
Well, let me start here. First and foremost, the academic qualification is not a constitutional requirement. It's a legal requirement that we made a law around. Secondly, I said in my statement that Sonko is a very clever individual. He's extremely clever, just the same way as Babayao across the road in Kiambu is very clever. Their political competence is without question.
Okay.
Their executive competence has extreme question in my mind, and it is not a consequence of their academia. No. It is a consequence of their personality, their history, and their ability to kick people in front of cameras. Let's understand that, okay? You can be a professor like Professor Obel and have the audacity to pull out a gun at a very inconvenient time. That is not a function of academia. In fact, the reason why I doubt Sonko's credentials in being able to lead a county such as Nairobi is not based on his academics. He has a degree, and we all know that he went to school and got his degree. But that does not make him competent. That being said, the key question that we have to ask ourselves, and this must keep saying that Igathe owes Kenyans an apology. He doesn't. Because in this country, and we've proven it right from Joho, in Mombasa, in Machakos, Dr. Alfred Mutua, in their last term, had serious issues with their deputy governors who wanted work to do. But guess what? If I asked you what Julius Mweke did in Nairobi County for the last 5 years, other than have an office and a nice haircut, you will fail to tell me. Because the reality of the matter is this, whether by omission or commission, when we wrote the Constitution 2010, we did not create a role and an office that is functional for the deputy governor. And that is not the fault of Sonko, it's not the fault of Igathe, it's the reality that he has to live with. And if Igathe had the pipe dream, and I'm calling it a pipe dream because it was impossible from the beginning, to be able to execute anything without the full knowledge, power, and authority of Sonko, it was going to be an impossibility. Can these two ideas coexist? No, because Sonko is still playing populist politics. This is the reason why our city is now full of hawkers. Why? Because he's still pandering to his base as though he's a member of parliament. He's not transitioned into being a governor yet. Will he? I don't know. I hope he does because I live in Nairobi, but I highly doubt it.
All right.
Ben, two questions come at play. Then did Jubilee make an erroneous decision by sending Sonko's name or presenting Sonko as the candidate for Jubilee? Does it mean that the vetting process was not very solid? Because you cannot tell us that Sonko is the Jubilee leader for Nairobi, yet on one side you are giving him a pat on the back, and then you don't want to have the party held liable. That's number one. Number two, essentially, and calling a spade, when you're a deputy governor, you go to the office in the morning, and most of them will not admit this in public. but hoping that something is going to happen to the governor so that they take office. Essentially, that's their role. So you serve at the pleasure of the governor. If the governor decides to make you a substantive principal assistant, he will. If he doesn't like you, then you will be working on broken eggshells. And Igathe is happy that actually Sonko did not lock his office. He gave him the opportunity to speak with him. So it's incumbent on a deputy governor to study the boss and understand what are his insecurities, manage expectations, go talk to him, make him that this thing is about your legacy, it's not about me, Igathe, it's about you, and then make progress. But if you go there thinking that you are an equal to the governor, then sooner than later, your office is going to be locked.
Allow me to answer.
1 minute only.
Just 1 minute.
Yes.
There is a philosopher, he's called Socrates, and Socrates had a simple argument. He said that if you have a city and the dentist is running against the sweet salesperson, the sweet salesperson will win. Now, the reality of the matter is Jubilee is a democratic party. It fielded several candidates. Now, unfortunately, most of the candidates were dentists. Sonko was a sweet salesperson. And you can never convince a child to vote for the dentist. It's painful. So what Nairobi needed was a dentist. But we voted for a populist candidate. That's our own fault. So we must live with the populist regime. It is not Jubilee's fault.
Who presented the candidates?
The candidate presented himself.
No, but Jubilee had a vetting mechanism, and they would have easily said no.
But he's not committed a crime. He has the proper qualifications.
There's a list of ticks and boxes to tick.
He ticks all the boxes.
And then politics took over.
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you this, Sandra. Mark has raised this issue of both Mark and Dismas, the issue of the relationships between the deputy governors and their bosses. Judging by the last 5 years, from 2013 to 2017, a lot of them have been acrimonious. There was a case of Monyo and the Mwangi area in Kirinyaga, where Monyo's office he was locked out of his office or something. There was Kiala and Alfred Mutua in Machakos. So the ambiguity in the deputy governor's role, is that to blame for what's happening between Igathe and Sonko? Like Igathe has found himself in exact same position as Kiala and the rest, and he cannot take it.
I'd look at it differently, not necessarily a lack of definition of the role of deputies, because I think we've had deputies and vice persons for a long time in whichever post, right from the presidency to the ministries and whatnot. We've had individuals deputizing or assisting those in high offices, or those who have the bigger responsibility. And I like the question of why. Why is this happening? And I look at it from the aspect of, one, because of the system we are working with in terms of counties, devolution in particular, and the intrigues around devolution, resources, power, and the fact that now it's not appointive, it's very elective. So you have a good number of things at play. You have people who are thinking of succession politics. You have resources involved. You have a lot of interests that are vested in it. And then what makes this even worse is the fact that there isn't a common vision for what devolution is meant to be, what devolution is supposed to deliver. And most times you find the unfortunate thing, even for the governors themselves, they don't look at devolution as something that's supposed to better the lives of Kenyans and better the lives of those they govern. So that without that common vision, it does not matter whom you're going to bring on board. If you don't have a common vision that you share, that you're both working towards, then it becomes a problem. So for me, it's a great understanding of what devolution is meant to achieve. And secondly, how the individuals in that place are putting aside their vested interests towards a common vision.
All right. Let's take another quick commercial break here on the show. When we return, we'll wind up this conversation. We'll talk about, we'll wind up the issue of the ambiguity in the deputy governor's role. Section 179.3 says that the deputy governor is the deputy chief executive officer of the county and deputizes the governor in his absence. Is there a difference between what Deputy President William Ruto is to President Uhuru Kenyatta and what the deputy governors are to their governors? We'll take a look at that, and also we'll talk about the reported politics inside the Sonko Igathe issue, the issue of Sonko's camp feeling that he was imposed on them. There has been another theory that says that there is a ministry of Nairobi Metropolitan that is being created and has been set aside for Igathe. Probably, is this Jubilee inside wars. Don't go too far. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's take another quick commercial break. We're back shortly. Let's bring you our sound of the week.
Shule tulikuwa